Professor Wergely's here. We just got done looking at functional interfaces. We also just got done importing our external library. Let's use them. I can't wait to get this going. This is a great example for your final project. So now I'm going to go over to Unzip. If I go over to unzip.java, you'll see this extends the thread superclass. What does that mean? That means unzip is a thread. There's two ways to create a thread. You either extends the thread superclass or you implements the runnable interface. For unzip, I'm not going to use inheritance here. So I'm not worried about wasting this inheritance. So I'm going to use the easier way to implement the thread. However, the textbook recommends you implements the runnable interface. That's the better way, so you don't waste that inheritance, so to speak. For this example, we can use the thread superclass at first. Later, we can switch it to implements the runnable interface. And that's how we've been doing pretty much everything all semester, like with MVC. We just got the application to work. And then once we got it to work, we went back and implemented MVC. So it's a little bit of a reverse engineering. I kind of recommend you do that. That way you can get your final project done, up and running, and then you can go back and fix up and use proper programming techniques. If you're an experienced programmer, you can do the proper programming techniques from the start. If you've never done it before, get it to work and then use proper programming techniques. So here I'm going to use notification. Now, notification is my interface. So you see I have a constructor. The constructor takes a source file and a destination file. Remember the purpose of this project. It's to unzip all the zip files from the student's submissions. So I need to tell you where all the zip files are located and then where do I want to unzip them to. So you'll see I store those as class fields. And then you'll see here I grab all the files in the source directory. So you'll see I list all the files and I only want to accept zip files here. So I actually created a file name filter. This is pretty cool. And I can tell it exactly what to accept. I don't want to unzip all the files. Let's say I get an image file or I get a text file. I can't unzip them. I'll get errors. So I only want to return true when the file name ends with .zip. So I will return true. You'll see here accept has a file directory and a file name. So I'll say only accept it when file names in that directory ends with, this is a string, so I built in functions with the string. You can see contains, ends with. This is one of the functions that are in the string class. Test if the string ends with the specified suffix. Okay, returns true if the character sequence represented by the argument is a suffix of the character sequence represented by the object itself. Okay, so know your built-in functions. When you go to interviews, they want you to use the built-in functions. A lot of times they don't want you to build it from scratch. You only build it from scratch if the interviewer asks you to. So I'm going to use the built-in functions. Ends with .zip. I only want to open up zip files. You'll see I built a few methods here. Get number of files. If files is not equal to null, you'll see files here is an array. So I'm going to list all the files with zips, and I'm going to store them to this array. So as long as the array doesn't equal null, I'm going to return .linked. If the array is equal to null, I'll get a null pointer exception, so I need to return 0. You'll see get files. I'll return the files global variable, the class field. And look at this, I have the run method. Remember what the run method is. That's for the thread. So this is what's going to happen concurrently. I'm going to go to the destination, and I'm going to loop through all the files. While I'm looping through the files, I need to unzip them. So I'm going to use this external library. Now, you'll want to use an external library that has good docs. So if I come over here and I go to their GitHub repo, you'll see they have docs here. It tells you how to create, add, extract, or update, remove file. It actually has code for Maven projects or regular Java projects. It tells you how to use it, how to add files to a zip file, how to add a folder, how to unzip them. Look at all this great documentation. This is the type of library that you want to use. If you find a library online, it doesn't have really good documentation, then I'd recommend not to use it because it may make your life and project more complicated. But look how good this document is. Extract a single file from a zip. You just call the extract file method. Now, when this first came out, when this author Lingala wrote this, it was awesome because the JDK didn't have it, and we had to build this ourselves. But now we use his external library. We could just call one function, and it took care of everything for us. And that's how you want your final project to go. If you're writing a lot of the code from scratch, you're probably doing something wrong. Now, I know coming from the basic programming courses, 1050, 2050, you're supposed to build everything from scratch, but not in this course. Use libraries. In fact, you'll get bonus points for them. Use APIs. Don't have a bunch of hard-coded data. Pull data from APIs. Use libraries. Use the built-in functions. Use documentation online. Just make sure you reference them. As long as you reference them, you're going to be okay, and you can use them. Okay, now when I use a library though, that shouldn't be my whole project. Like let's say I use his library and I show you how to unzip one file and I submit that for my final project. That's not going to cut it. The library should be a small piece of your project, just like I'm going to show you here. Okay, so I have some code. I'm using the library to make my life easier, to make my code easier. And it's just a single piece of my project. It's not the entire project itself. If you ever have a question of whether you can use something or whether it's good enough, stop by my office hours. We can review it and I'll make sure the final project is good. So anyway, use libraries with good docs. This is great docs. So here I'm going to loop through all the files. You'll see I have my exit. Remember, to exit, I want to make the run method finish executing. So I'm going to call break. Remember, we went through all of the different combinations. We have break, return, and continue. Return will end right now. It won't do anything else. Break will break out of this for loop and continue with the next lines. Continue will just skip that current iteration and go to the next one. So break will break out of the for loop. It'll execute this line right here, and then it'll end. Before I end, I want to unzip the file. So you see here I have my stop. Here I have it's extracting with the number of files. Okay, right after that, I'm going to try to unzip a file. Now I'm going to write this code, but I'm using it from the docs. It says to create a zip file object, so I will. Zip file is actually in the library. This is not part of the JDK, or at least not at this time. Later, they did have some zip file class. So you see it doesn't know what it is. I've successfully imported the jar. And so if I click on it, it says add import from either Java utility zip file or my external library. So you see in this JDK version, I do have a zip file, but a while ago they didn't have it. So I'm going to use Lingala's zip4j core zip file. So if I open this up, I'm going to add the second import here. And we actually look at it. So if I go to this import, it's .NET Lingala zip4j core. If I open this up, and it's called zip file. You'll see they're .class files. So these are the compiled versions of the code. I can open them up. You can see the fields. You can see the methods, but inside is compiled code. He doesn't want to give us his secrets on how he wrote the code to unzip the files and do all these other things. But he's going to allow them to use it. He's going to allow us to use it. Okay, so this is actually abstraction. Remember we talked about abstraction. It's allowing somebody to use your code while hiding the underlying implementation. This is the formal definition of abstraction, and you'll want to know that for the final exam. So this is an API, so to speak. This is a library that I'm able to use, but I cannot see the internal implementation. But he tells me how to use it. He says if you want to unzip a file, instantiate the zip file and call the extract file method, which provides the destination directory and what the file name should be. Okay, so if I come back to my code, open up unzip.java, go back down, you'll see here I wrote it correctly, but the red line is not underneath the entire line of code. It's only underneath the right part here, which tells me that my code is right. I'm just not catching an exception. If the line were under the entire line of code, then it's a compile error. I still have a compile error, but this is for an exception. You'll see unreported exception, zip exception, must be caught or declared to be thrown, because I need to follow the catch and specify requirement. So I open this up. I'm going to surround the statement with the try catch. This zip exception is handled here. Okay, so you'll see here, throws zip exception. So if it throws a zip exception, I need to handle that, which I'm doing now with my try catch. Now I can log it in the logger, which is always recommended, but I also have a state. So I'm going to call do notify. Do notify actually updates the UI. So I'm going to copy a lot of the lines of code here. Okay, I'm going to copy a lot of these lines here, so I don't have to write this over again. And basically, what do I want to display? First, I want to display what percentage happened. So I'm going to calculate the percentage with the number of complete divided by the total length. Then I'm going to set the state. The state is not running. I actually am in an exception. So I'm going to change this to exception. That's the current state. And then what's the message? I'm not extracting. This is actually an exception. So I can say exception occurred on, and I'll say file.getPath. It occurred on this file, and then I'm actually going to display the exception. And the exception would be whatever was passed as a parameter. You'll see this EX here. That's my exception. So I can display the message. Okay, and that's what was required. So do notify. It takes the percentage complete, the state, and the message. Okay, so it requires 3 things. So I'll do it on 3 different lines. I have methods here built in. So calculate percent, takes the count divided by the total. You see it turns them into doubles. Do notify, we'll write here in a little bit. And I'm going to try to, so I'm only created the zip file. I haven't unzipped it yet. If you follow the docs, it says to use the extract method. They also have an extract all. So if I do the dot notation, what's cool is it's actually reading from this library now. I've successfully imported this jar, so it's just like the JDK. It tells you what method you have. And look at the extract all. I can extract all the contents to the destination path. So I'm going to use this method here. And I'm going to put the destination directory path, which is a variable that we passed in. Okay, you'll see it here. It's a variable that we passed in to the constructor. I'm not done yet though. Once unzip extract all is successful, then I'm going to increase the number of complete. Number of complete plus plus. So it's just a counter. Number of complete equals to 0. Once I loop through, after I extract the contents, increment the number of complete. I'm putting space here just so it's a little bit easier to read. Although in an interview or in the real world, we probably wouldn't put spaces here. We probably have it like this. Okay, so I'm going to try to unzip the file. If anything happens, I'm going to go into this exception. I'm going to log it, and I'm also going to notify the display. You may want to finally block to destroy anything, maybe destroy the zip file, destroy the extract all. I can look at the Java docs. If I show Java doc, it actually won't pop up. I can actually look at the extract all in the class. Okay, so if I go to extract all, here it is, takes a destination. It also throws a zip exception, and it tells you what the errors are. Okay, so it tells you what the errors are. It may have different error numbers, and then each number tells you what the problem is. So this is a great library. They have error messages, they have documentation. You can actually look at the code, look at the exceptions. You can actually read about it here. So this is a really good example of a library that you could use, okay, for your final project where you can earn bonus points. So I come back to unzip. This is ready to go. So if this throws an error, it'll throw an zip exception. If this throws an error, it'll also throw a zip exception. So we're good. We're going to create a zip file, extract all the contents, increment the number of complete. If this fails, this will not increment. If this fails, this will not increment. Once the line fails, it goes right to the catch statement. If you forgot about how try and catch blocks work, you can go back to the previous lecture. Okay, the previous lecture with exception handling. So that's what we're going to do. I want this to run asynchronously. I'm going to loop through all the files. and I'm going to unzip them. If the user closes the window, I'm going to kill the program. You'll see I have made an end variable, so I'm using proper programming techniques compared to the last example. I have this as public. I should change this to private. Use data encapsulation. Change this to private. The only way to stop it is to call the end method. Okay, and you can even make the stop method, but end is better so it doesn't get confused with the original stop method. You'll see calculate percentage, set on notification. Next, we need to implement do notify. Now, what's cool about do notify is it's going to actually update the user interface. Remember what the rules were when a thread updates the user interface. Now you'll see all these do notifies. So I could, remember we have to run it on the main thread. So I could say platform run later here, platform run later here, platform run later here. I don't want to do that multiple times. So if you're seeing yourself writing the code several times over and over again, you're doing something wrong. Either create a method or create a class. Make sure you're not writing the same code twice. I'm going to show you how to write do notify in the next video. Stick with Professor Wergeles. We'll see you in the next video.